You said you could fix it, but I have to be back before midnight.
I said I'd get you home. One more minute. Son, enough of this. You don't get to show up only investigator to find you. I didn't want you meeting them yet.
The billionaire father stared at the poor waitress for only 5 seconds before his face suddenly changed. Not because he hated her, but because he recognized her. 20 years earlier, her father begged him for mercy. Now his son was in love with the daughter of the man he destroyed. Rain poured heavily across Brooklyn. The small auto repair shop was nearly empty, except for one customer arguing loudly about a delayed engine repair. Daniel Hayes stayed calm. "You'll have your car tomorrow morning," he said quietly, wiping grease from his hands. The customer scoffed. "You mechanics are all the same." Daniel said nothing, because insults no longer affected him, not after the life he left behind. The customer finally stormed out, slamming the garage door. Silence filled the shop again. Daniel exhaled slowly and leaned against the old workbench. His best friend Marcus shook his head. "You know, normal billionaires buy islands." Daniel smirked faintly. "And normal people mind their business." Marcus laughed. "I'm serious, man. Your father owns half of New York, and you're under cars changing brake pads." At the mention of his father, Daniel's expression changed instantly. Cold, distant. "Don't start." Marcus raised both hands. Okay. But then he lowered his voice carefully. "I still don't understand how you walked away from all that money." Daniel stared quietly at the rain outside the garage. "You ever sit at a dinner table where everybody smiles, but nobody's human?" Marcus frowned. Daniel continued softly. "My father doesn't care about people, only power." Flash cuts entered his mind instantly. Men screaming during business meetings, bodyguards dragging someone out of his father's office, politicians secretly shaking hands with his father coldly saying, "Compassion makes men weak." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I grew up around monsters pretending to wear expensive suits." Marcus stayed silent, because Daniel almost never talked about his past. Then suddenly, the garage lights flickered. A soft female voice came from behind them. "Excuse me." Daniel turned, and for a moment, everything around him disappeared. A young woman stood near the garage entrance, completely soaked from the rain. Her hoodie clung slightly to her shoulders, dark hair wet, breathing heavily, nervous eyes, beautiful without even trying. "My car broke down 2 blocks away," she said apologetically. "I know you're probably closed, but—" Daniel interrupted gently. "I'll take a look." She smiled in relief, and Daniel felt something in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The rain became heavier as Daniel pulled open the hood of the old Toyota. Emily Carter stood nearby, hugging herself from the cold. Daniel checked the engine carefully. "You drove this while the oil light was on." Emily looked embarrassed. "Maybe." Daniel laughed quietly for the first time all day. That's basically attempted murder for a car. Emily smiled, and something about her smile felt painfully genuine. Not fake, not polished, not like the wealthy women Daniel grew up around. Real. Marcus watched from inside the garage with narrowed eyes, because he had never seen Daniel look at someone like that before. Daniel closed the hood. "You're lucky. It's not too bad." Emily sighed dramatically. "Oh, thank God, because I genuinely have $38 in my bank account." Daniel chuckled. "That bad?" "Worse." She hesitated before adding, "I work at a diner nearby. Double shifts." Daniel nodded slowly. There was no self-pity in her voice, just exhaustion. That hit him harder than he expected. Most people around billionaires complain despite having everything. this girl? She was fighting just to survive. Daniel grabbed a towel and handed it to her. You should sit inside before you freeze. Inside the garage office, Marcus immediately smirked. So this is why you suddenly care about customers. Emily laughed softly. Daniel rolled his eyes. Ignore him. Marcus extended his hand dramatically. Marcus, professional third wheel. Emily smiled warmly. Emily. For the next hour, the three of them talked while the storm continued outside. And for the first time in years, Daniel forgot about his father. Forgot about billion-dollar companies. Forgot about power. Because sitting across from Emily felt normal. And normal was the one thing he had always wanted. As Emily prepared to leave, she reached for her wallet. But Daniel stopped her. It's fine. Her eyes widened immediately. No, I can pay. You said you have $38. Emily stared at him suspiciously. You always rescue strangers for free. Daniel smirked slightly. Only the dramatic ones. Emily laughed again. Then she looked at him carefully. You're different. Daniel froze slightly. Different how? She shrugged. I don't know. You just don't feel like everybody else. For a second, Daniel almost told her the truth. That he wasn't just a mechanic. That his last name controlled headlines. That his father terrified politicians. But instead, he simply said, Good night, Emily. And as she walked away into the rain, Daniel couldn't explain why his heart suddenly followed her 3 nights later. Daniel sat alone inside the diner where Emily worked, watching her laugh with customers, watching her move quickly between tables, watching her pretend not to be exhausted. He smiled quietly to himself until his phone vibrated. The smile disappeared instantly. Unknown number. Daniel ignored it. The phone rang again and again. Then a message appeared. Your father knows where you are. Daniel's stomach tightened immediately. Across the diner, Emily noticed his expression. You okay? Daniel quickly locked the phone. Yeah, just work stuff. But it wasn't work. It was a warning. Because nobody found Daniel Hayes unless Richard Hayes allowed it. Hours later, the diner finally closed. Emily stepped outside, pulling her jacket tighter against the cold. Daniel followed beside her. Brooklyn streets glowed under the streetlights, quiet, peaceful. For once, Daniel almost believed his old life would never find him again. Then suddenly, 3 black SUVs slowly pulled up across the street. Every muscle in Daniel's body froze. The doors opened. Men in black suits stepped out first. Then finally, Richard Hayes emerged. Tall, controlled, terrifying. The kind of man whose presence alone made people nervous. Emily looked confused. Daniel, who's that? Daniel's voice turned cold. My father. Richard's eyes slowly moved toward Emily, and the moment he saw her, everything changed. His face lost color. His expression hardened instantly. Because he recognized her. Not from somewhere recent, from 20 years ago. Emily looked uncomfortable under his stare. Richard walked closer slowly, then quietly said, What's your name? Emily Carter. Silence. A dangerous silence. Richard's jaw tightened slightly, and for the first time in years, the billionaire looked shaken, because standing in front of him was the daughter of the man whose life he destroyed. The street suddenly felt colder. The bodyguard stood silently beside the black SUVs while rainwater rolled across the pavement. Emily looked between Daniel and his father, confused by the tension thickening the air. Daniel stepped slightly in front of her. What are you doing here? Richard Hayes ignored the question completely. His eyes remained fixed on Emily, studying her. almost like he had seen a ghost. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Do we know each other? Richard finally spoke. No. But the answer came too quickly, too sharp. Daniel noticed immediately, and that terrified him more than anything, because his father never lost composure. Never. Richard slowly looked back at his son. You disappeared for 2 years, he said calmly. And this is where I find you? Daniel's jaw tightened. I told you I was done with your world. You don't walk away from family. Daniel almost laughed. Family? The word dripped with bitterness. You taught me business, not family. The bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances. Emily stayed silent, sensing this was much deeper than ordinary father-son conflict. Richard stepped closer. His voice lowered dangerously. Get in the car, Daniel. No. The answer came instantly. Cold. Firm. For a brief second, something dark flashed across Richard's face. Not anger. Control. The terrifying kind of control powerful men develop after years of getting exactly what they want. Then his eyes moved toward Emily again. What did he tell you about himself? Daniel snapped immediately. Don't involve her. But Richard ignored him. Emily looked at Daniel carefully. What does he mean? Silence. Daniel's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He wasn't ready for this. Not like this. Not in front of his father. Richard smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried no warmth. He didn't tell you? Daniel's voice turned deadly quiet. Stop. But Richard continued. The mechanic you've been spending time with? He glanced at Daniel with disappointment. Is the sole heir to Hayes Global Holdings. Emily blinked. What? Richard's voice remained calm. One day, everything I built will belong to him. Daniel looked at her immediately. Emily, listen to me. You lied to me? No, You let her believe you were poor? Richard interrupted coldly. Daniel turned furiously. You think I wanted her anywhere near your world? The tension exploded instantly. Even the bodyguards looked uncomfortable now. Emily stared at Daniel, trying to process everything. Heir? Hayes Global Holdings? Nothing made sense anymore. Then Richard spoke again. And this time, his voice became frighteningly personal. How old were you when your father died, Emily? Everything stopped. Daniel froze. Emily's expression changed immediately. How do you know about my father? Richard said nothing, but Daniel saw it. For the first time in his life, he saw guilt in his father's eyes. And suddenly, Daniel realized this meeting was not a coincidence. His father already knew exactly who Emily was. Emily barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Richard Hayes staring at her like he had seen a ghost. And Daniel standing there hiding an entire billionaire life from her. By 2 a.m., frustration finally pushed her out of bed. She walked toward the old wooden box her father left behind years ago, the same box she hadn't opened in a long time. Inside were old photographs, unpaid bills, letters, documents, memories of a life destroyed slowly. Emily sat quietly on the floor, flipping through them. Then suddenly, she froze. A photograph slipped from one of the old books. Her father stood beside a younger Richard Hayes, both smiling, both dressed in cheap suits, both looking hopeful. Emily stared in disbelief. What? On the back of the photo were handwritten words, "Before money changed everything." A painful silence filled the room. Then another memory came rushing back. Flashback young. Emily sat at the dinner table while her father quietly stared at old business papers. Dad. He looked up weakly. Do you hate rich people? Her father smiled sadly. No. Then why do you always look sad when you hear Richard Hayes on TV? The smile disappeared instantly. And for the first time, Emily saw pain in his eyes. Because some people become so hungry for success. He looked away quietly. They forget who they used to be. Back to present. Emily's eyes slowly filled with tears, because suddenly, everything started making sense. The ruined business, the depression, the silence, the bitterness, and somehow, Daniel was connected to all of it. Her phone suddenly vibrated. Daniel calling. Emily stared at the screen for several seconds, then finally answered. Emily, please let me explain. Her voice shook slightly. Did your father destroy mine? Silence. Painful silence. Daniel finally answered quietly. I think my father destroyed a lot of people trying to become who he is today. A tear rolled down Emily's face instantly. Then Daniel softly added, but I'm not him. And somehow, that was the part that hurt the most, because despite everything, she still wanted to believe him. The next morning, Emily ignored all 12 of Daniel's calls. By afternoon, he showed up outside her apartment. She saw him through the window immediately and refused to open the door. Daniel stayed outside anyway, for nearly 30 minutes. Finally, Emily opened the door slightly. What do you want? Daniel looked exhausted. Not billionaire exhausted, emotionally exhausted. I just want to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Emily, please. She folded her arms tightly. You lied to me every single day. Daniel shook his head immediately. No, I hid my last name. That's still lying. He lowered his eyes briefly. I know. Silence. Painful silence. Then Emily quietly asked, Did you know who I was before we met? Daniel looked confused. What? My father. Her eyes searched his face carefully. Did you approach me because of what happened between our families? Daniel's expression changed instantly. No. The answer came fast, honest, firm. I swear to you, Emily, I didn't even know your full name until that night outside the diner. Emily stared at him carefully, and somehow, she believed him. Daniel continued softly, I met you because your car broke down. A tiny smile almost escaped her. Almost, Daniel noticed, and stepped closer carefully. I didn't tell you who I was because I hate what my father's name represents. Emily stayed quiet. Daniel continued. You saw him for 5 minutes. His jaw tightened slightly. I lived with him for 30 years. That hit differently. Daniel looked away briefly before continuing. My father built an empire. Then softly added, but somewhere along the way, he stopped being human. Emily's expression softened slightly. For the first time since everything happened, she saw pain in him too. Real pain. Not billionaire problems. Family pain. Daniel exhaled slowly. My mother is nothing like him. His voice softened at the mention of her. She's calm, kind, simple. A faint smile appeared briefly. She still cooks her own food even with chefs in the house. Emily almost laughed softly. Daniel looked back at her. That's the kind of life I wanted. Silence filled the hallway. Then he quietly admitted, when I'm with you, I feel normal. Emily's eyes slowly lowered, because despite everything, that was exactly how she felt too. Daniel stepped closer one final time. I'm sorry I hid my identity. His voice became softer. But I wasn't ashamed of you. A painful pause. I was ashamed of my world. And somehow, that was the sentence that finally broke Emily's anger. 2 nights later, Daniel sat nervously inside a small rooftop restaurant waiting for Emily. He checked his phone again. No message, no call, nothing. Then finally, he saw her walking toward him. Simple black dress, minimal makeup, beautiful without trying. Daniel immediately stood up. "You came." Emily sat down carefully. "Don't make this dramatic." Daniel laughed softly for the first time in days, and somehow, that made the tension between them ease slightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily finally looked at him seriously. "Why did you really leave your family?" Daniel leaned back quietly. "You ever grow up around people who only value power?" Emily stayed silent. Daniel continued, "My father believes money fixes everything." He gave a dry laugh. "Business before family, reputation before emotions." Emily listened carefully. "And your mother?" Daniel's expression softened instantly. "My mother loved him before he became Richard Hayes." Emily frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Daniel smiled faintly. "My mother grew up in a small fishing village." Emily looked surprised. "She sold fish by the roadside when they met." "What?" Daniel nodded. "My father wasn't born rich." He looked away thoughtfully. He became obsessed with success after years of struggling. Emily stayed quiet. "But my mother never changed." His voice became softer. "She still believes people matter more than money." Then Daniel looked directly at Emily. "That's why I left." Silence. Then softly, he admitted the truth he had never told anyone completely. "I was scared of becoming my father." Emily's expression slowly softened again, because for the first time, she understood something important. Daniel Hayes did not run away from wealth. He ran away from the man behind it. Then Daniel carefully reached across the table. "Come to dinner with me." Emily blinked. "What?" "My mother wants to see you again." "And your father?" Daniel sighed heavily. "He's trying." Emily looked unconvinced immediately. "That man does not look like he tries anything." Daniel accidentally laughed again, and Emily hated that she loved hearing it. Then softly, he said, "Please." A long silence followed. Then finally, Emily nodded once. "Okay." And Daniel smiled like a man getting his entire world back. 2 days later, Daniel stood outside Emily's apartment holding a bouquet of white roses, not because he thought flowers solved problems, but because he genuinely wanted tonight to go well. Emily opened the door slowly. Her eyes immediately dropped to the flowers. "You're doing too much." Daniel smirked faintly. "My mother said women like flowers." Emily raised an eyebrow. "And you listened?" "She scares me more than my father." That accidentally made Emily laugh, and the sound instantly relaxed him. For the first time since everything fell apart, things finally felt a little normal again. Cut to the Hayes mansion. The massive gate slowly opened as Daniel's car entered the estate. Emily stared quietly out the window. Even at night, the property looked unreal. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Soft golden lights reflected against the marble fountain outside. Everything screamed money. Daniel noticed her expression. "You okay?" Emily nodded slowly. "I just can't believe people actually live like this." Daniel looked toward the mansion briefly. "Trust me, it's not as perfect as it looks." Inside the mansion, Victoria Hayes immediately welcomed Emily warmly. "You came." She hugged Emily gently before turning toward Daniel. "You look nervous." Daniel sighed dramatically. "Because my father exists." Victoria laughed softly. Emily smiled despite herself. And for a few minutes, everything actually felt peaceful. Until Richard Hayes entered the dining room. The atmosphere changed instantly. Sharp black suit, cold expression, controlled presence. Richard looked toward Emily briefly, then toward his son. Sit down. Dinner began quietly. Too quietly. Emily tried her best to remain calm while servers placed expensive dishes around the table. Finally, Richard placed his wineglass down and looked directly at Emily. So, his tone remained calm. What exactly do you plan on doing with your life? Daniel immediately frowned. Dad. But Richard ignored him. Emily answered politely. I work at a diner right now. Richard nodded slowly. Yes, I'm aware. Something about the way he said it felt insulting. Emily noticed immediately. Richard continued calmly. And that's enough for you? Daniel sighed heavily. Here we go. Emily sat straighter now. I don't measure success the same way you do. Victoria quietly smiled to herself, but Richard's expression barely changed. You sound exactly like your father. The entire table froze. Daniel immediately looked furious. Dad. But Richard continued anyway. David Carter also believed money wasn't everything. Emily's chest tightened instantly. Richard leaned back slightly. He was a smart man. A pause. Just not smart enough to survive the business world. Daniel slammed his hand lightly against the table. That's enough. The room went silent. Richard finally looked toward his son. You're emotional. And you're cruel. The words landed heavily. Victoria quietly lowered her eyes, because deep down, she knew Daniel was right. Emily slowly stood from her chair, her eyes slightly glossy now. I think I should leave. Daniel immediately stood too. Emily, wait. But she shook her head softly. No. Then she looked directly at Richard and quietly said, My father died poor. Silence filled the room, but at least he died a good man. Richard's expression changed instantly. Not anger. Something worse. Guilt. Real guilt. Emily turned and walked away. Daniel immediately followed her out, and the moment the mansion doors shut, Victoria Hayes slowly turned toward her husband, disappointed, furious, heartbroken. What is wrong with you? The mansion felt unusually quiet after Daniel left with Emily. Richard stood near the dining room window, staring outside silently. Victoria entered slowly behind him. You humiliated that girl. Richard didn't turn around. She shouldn't be involved in this family. Victoria crossed her arms. Why? Still no answer. Then finally, Richard spoke quietly. Because people connected to this family suffer. Victoria stared at him carefully. This is about David Carter. Richard's jaw tightened instantly. Silence confirmed everything. Victoria walked closer slowly. You still blame yourself. Richard laughed bitterly. How could I not? For the first time all night, the billionaire no longer looked powerful. Just tired. Victoria's voice softened. You loved David like a brother once. Richard looked away. That was before greed ruined everything. Victoria shook her head slowly. No. Her eyes filled slightly. Greed ruined you. That line hit harder than Richard expected. Victoria stepped closer. When you met me, a faint emotional smile crossed her face. I was selling fish beside a dusty roadside market. Richard closed his eyes briefly. You had nothing. She smiled softly. And neither did you. Silence. Painful silence. Victoria continued. You didn't care about class back then. Her voice became firmer now. You cared about love. Richard finally looked at her. And for the first time that night, his expression cracked slightly. Victoria lowered her voice. You built this empire so your children could have freedom. Then softly added, but now you're trying to control who your son loves. Richard looked exhausted suddenly. He's my son. And he's 34 years old. That landed heavily. Victoria stepped even closer now. You're so busy trying to protect Daniel from your past? Her voice softened sadly. That you're becoming the exact reason he ran away from this family. Richard said nothing, because deep down, he knew she was right. Then quietly, Victoria asked the one question he had avoided for 20 years. Did you ever apologize to David's daughter? Richard's silence answered everything, and somehow, that silence felt heavier than words. 3 days passed. No calls, no visits, no messages from Daniel. Emily actually missed him more than she wanted to admit, which annoyed her. She was arranging coffee cups behind the diner counter when the manager suddenly approached her nervously. Emily. She looked up. There's someone outside asking for you. Emily frowned slightly. Who? The manager lowered his voice dramatically. A billionaire. Emily immediately knew. Richard Hayes. Outside the diner, a black luxury car waited by the sidewalk. Richard stood beside it alone. No bodyguards this time. No intimidating entourage. Just him. Emily walked toward him carefully. You came alone? Richard gave a faint, dry smile. My wife said I look less terrifying without 12 men behind me. Emily didn't laugh. Richard noticed. And honestly, he didn't blame her. For a few awkward seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Richard finally handed her a small envelope. Emily looked confused. What's this? An invitation. She frowned slightly. For what? Richard exhaled slowly. Dinner. Emily almost laughed in disbelief. You already tried that. I know. Silence. Then, for the first time since she met him, Richard Hayes spoke without arrogance, without control, without power. I owe you an apology. Emily stared at him carefully, because this version of Richard Hayes felt completely different from the man at the mansion. Softer, older, tired. Richard looked away briefly before continuing. I also owe your father one. That sentence immediately changed everything. Emily's expression softened slightly. Richard looked back at her. There are things you deserve to know. Silence filled the sidewalk. Then quietly, Emily asked, Why now? Richard's voice lowered. Because my son hasn't spoken to me since that dinner. For the first time, Emily saw genuine regret in his eyes, not billionaire pride, not manipulation. Regret. Then Richard carefully added, Daniel hates many things about me. A faint, painful smile crossed his face. But hurting people he loves. He lowered his eyes briefly. That's the one thing he'll never forgive. Emily looked down at the invitation silently, then back at him. And Daniel knows about this? Richard shook his head. No. That surprised her. Richard continued softly. This invitation is from me. A long silence followed. Then finally, Emily accepted the envelope. And for the first time in 20 years, Richard Hayes felt like he might finally stop running from his past. The second dinner felt completely different from the first. Quieter, softer, more human. Victoria warmly welcomed Emily again. And this time, Richard made an effort. A real effort. No insults, no cold remarks, no humiliation. Daniel looked genuinely confused the entire evening. At one point, he leaned toward his mother and whispered, Who is this man, and what did you do with my father? Victoria nearly laughed into her wineglass. After dinner, Richard slowly stood. Emily. She looked up carefully. Would you walk with me for a moment? Daniel immediately frowned. Dad. But Emily gently touched Daniel's hand. It's okay. Outside, the mansion garden glowed beautifully beneath soft lights. Flowers lined the stone pathways. Fountains echoed quietly in the distance. For a while, Richard simply walked beside her silently. Then finally, he spoke. "Your father was my best friend." Emily looked toward him quietly. Richard's eyes stayed ahead. "We built everything together from nothing." A faint, bitter smile crossed his face. "We were young, hungry, ambitious." He looked down briefly. "But I became impatient." Silence. Richard continued slowly. "David believed success should come honestly." His jaw tightened slightly. "I believed success couldn't wait." Emily listened carefully. Richard's voice became heavier now. "I accepted business deals from dangerous men." A painful pause. "The money changed everything." Emily lowered her eyes slightly. Richard continued. "The company exploded overnight." His voice carried no pride. Luxury, power, influence. Then quietly added, "and destruction." The garden suddenly felt heavier. Richard finally looked at her. "Your father hated what I was becoming." Emily whispered softly. "But he stayed." Richard nodded once. "Because he kept trying to save me." That line hit emotionally. Richard exhaled slowly. When David threatened to expose those men, his eyes darkened slightly. "I begged him not to." Emily's chest tightened. "He said people like that destroy families." Richard nodded quietly. And he was right. Silence. Then softly, Richard admitted the truth he had buried for years. "I destroyed your father's career trying to stop him." Emily's eyes slowly filled. Richard looked ashamed. "I thought if I ruined his credibility..." His voice weakened slightly. "Those men would stop targeting him." Emily whispered, "But they didn't." Richard looked away. "No." A painful silence followed. Then finally, he turned toward her fully. "I can never undo what happened to your family." He slowly handed her a folder. Inside were legal documents, property transfers, bank information. Emily frowned slightly. "What is this?" "Your father's shares." Her eyes widened instantly. Richard's voice softened. "I kept them all these years." Emily looked stunned. Richard continued. "They belong to you." But Emily slowly closed the folder again. "I don't want it." Richard looked surprised. Emily's eyes filled slightly. "I didn't come here for money." Silence. Then softly, she added, "I just wanted peace." Richard stared at her quietly, and for the first time in years, the billionaire realized something terrifying. After spending his entire life chasing wealth, the one thing he truly envied was the simplicity of people like her. The next morning, Daniel was shocked when he received a message from his father. "Come to the office." That was it. No long speech, no threats, no demands. Just 5 words. Daniel stared at the message suspiciously. Emily looked up from the coffee she was making inside his apartment. "You look scared." Daniel gave a dry laugh. "My father only texts like that when someone's life is about to change." Emily walked closer. "Maybe this time it's something good." Daniel smirked faintly. "You clearly don't know Richard Hayes." But deep down, something felt different this time. Cut to Hayes Global Holdings headquarters. The massive glass building stood high above Manhattan like a symbol of power itself. Employees immediately straightened the moment Daniel entered. Whispers followed him through the lobby. Because for years, the billionaire heir disappeared from public life. And now suddenly, he was back, inside the executive office. Richard stood near the giant windows overlooking the city. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The tension between them had existed for years. But today, It felt quieter, less angry. Richard finally turned around slowly. "You look tired." Daniel scoffed softly. "Your favorite greeting?" A faint smile almost appeared on Richard's face. Almost. Then he gestured toward the office. "Sit." Daniel stayed standing. "What's this about?" Richard studied his son carefully, then quietly said, "You were right." Silence. Daniel frowned slightly. "What?" Richard exhaled slowly. "I built this company obsessed with power." His eyes moved toward the city skyline. "And somewhere along the way, I lost myself." Daniel stayed quiet, because in 34 years, he had never heard his father admit fault so openly. Richard continued, "I kept trying to control your life because I thought I was protecting you." Then finally looked directly at him. "But your mother helped me realize something." A painful pause. "I became the reason you ran away." Daniel's expression slowly softened. Not completely, but enough. Richard walked toward the massive executive desk slowly, then placed a folder in front of him. Daniel frowned. "What's this?" Richard's voice remained calm. "Your future." Daniel opened the folder carefully, then froze. CEO transferred documents. His eyes widened immediately. "What?" Richard looked strangely peaceful now. "It's your company now." Silence filled the office instantly. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. "You're stepping down." Richard nodded slowly. "I'm tired, Daniel." For the first time ever, his father looked his age. Not powerful, not untouchable, just tired. Richard continued softly. "You wanted to build a different life." Then looked directly at him. "So build a different company too." Daniel stared down at the document silently. Years ago, this was all he ever dreamed about. Changing the company, cleaning the corruption, turning it into something human. But now, the moment finally felt heavier than victory. Then quietly, Daniel asked, "Why now?" Richard's eyes softened slightly. "Because yesterday I saw something I haven't seen in this family for a very long time." Daniel frowned. "What?" A faint, emotional smile crossed Richard's face. "Peace." Silence filled the office again. Then Richard added quietly, "Don't lose that chasing success." And somehow, that advice meant more than every business lesson Richard Hayes had ever taught him. 6 months later, Hayes Global Holdings became a completely different company. Daniel changed everything. Corrupt partnerships disappeared. Employees were treated better. Scholarship programs expanded. Small businesses received funding opportunities. And for the first time in years, the company's name no longer carried fear. Richard Hayes watched it all quietly from retirement, sometimes with pride, sometimes with regret, but mostly with peace. And Emily? She stayed beside Daniel through all of it. Not because of the billions, not because of the luxury, but because underneath all the wealth, Daniel remained the same man who fixed her broken car in the rain. One evening, the Hayes estate glowed beautifully beneath thousands of lights. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Soft music floated through the air. Emily stood near the garden fountain wearing a breathtaking white dress. Her eyes filled slightly as she looked around. "This is insane." Victoria Hayes smiled warmly beside her. "You should have seen your father-in-law arguing over flower arrangements this morning." Emily laughed softly. Richard Hayes argued over flowers. Victoria grinned. For 2 hours. Across the garden, Daniel stood waiting in a black tuxedo. The moment he saw Emily, everything around him disappeared again, just like the first night at the garage. Only this time, he didn't have grease on his hands, and she wasn't standing in the rain. But somehow, She still looked at him exactly the same way, like she saw the man behind the name. As Emily reached him, Daniel smiled emotionally. "You're late." Emily laughed softly. "You sound like your father." Daniel groaned dramatically. "Don't ruin my wedding." She smiled, then quietly whispered, "You know what's funny?" Daniel frowned playfully. "What?" Tears filled her eyes slightly. "My car breaking down was the best thing that ever happened to me." Daniel's expression softened instantly. Then gently, he took her hand, and surrounded by luxury, lights, family, and love, the billionaire who once ran away from his father's empire finally understood something important. Money could build companies, power could build empires, but love was the only thing capable of rebuilding people. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't leave without subscribing. Because this wasn't just a billionaire love story. It was a story about a man trying to escape the sins of his family, a woman learning that love is stronger than money, and a father finally realizing that power means nothing if you lose the people you love. So if you believe love deserves a second chance, hit that subscribe button and join this family. And tell me in the comments, could you forgive someone who hid their billionaire identity from you?